Welcome back, everyone. We're Simply Bitcoin. We break down the news from Twitter, the daily fail, meme review, software releases, and the websites by plebs. Joining us today, very special guest, fellow Bitcoiner, and co-author of Only the Strong Survive. I am talking about Big Al. He is joining us, but right now we're diving into the numbers. Let's do it.
Number time! Number time is brought to you by Bitcoin 2022. It's going to be the largest Bitcoin conference ever, hosted in sunny Miami Beach, Florida. Get your tickets quickly because the prices do go up. Chad Saylor is going to speak there. President Bukele. Phil and I are going to have a panel as well. It's going to be really cool. You can take advantage of the link down below for 10% off your tickets to Bitcoin 2022.
At the time of this recording, the block height is 720,504. The Bitcoin price, 37,795. Chain rewrite days, 732. Total public lightning capacity, 3,363.73. Moscow time, 2646. And blocks to the halvening, 119,496. The numbers and some stutter.
Numbers, I had a slight pump. Yesterday.
Tell us about some hopium, Nico. Is there any hopium out there?
I do have hopium today. Hopium right into your veins. I mean, it's not really hopium because I'm not gonna give an analysis or breakdown of it. It's just cool data that we're gonna show, and then you guys could, think what you want of it, I guess. Anyways, let's check it out. It's our favorite, Glassnode.
Glassnode's back.
Yeah, this is Glassnode's back. But I'm not going to tell you what I think. I mean, look, you can attest what you want from this. Anyways, number of addresses with a non-zero balance, right? Right? It's going up. Very cool stuff. We can go to balance with a 0.01, right? It's going up. So, we got a lot of new stackers. Then addresses with 0.1. All right, it's getting up there, right? People are still stacking. And we got an address with a balance of 1 Bitcoin or above. See? Took a little bit of a tumble. But it's on the way back up again. Now, addresses with 10 Bitcoin or more. Now it's getting a little bit more serious. Look, took a lot more of a tumble. And if you compare this to January 2022... and January 2018, the addresses with 10 Bitcoin or more is about the same. It's really interesting. Kind of went sideways for a while. Now, addresses with 100 Bitcoin or more took even more of a tumble. It's still less than March 15, 2017. We're still less than that. Now, addresses with 1,000 Bitcoin or more. Now, these are either mega whale individuals or exchanges or businesses that are stacking, right? There's only 2,000 addresses, right, with 1,000 Bitcoin or more, and addresses with balances of 10,000 Bitcoin or more. This is like companies, exchanges, etc. This is also on the way down. So really interesting, right? Bitcoin addresses with 10 Bitcoin or more have actually either stayed about the same or they've gone down, and addresses with 1 Bitcoin or less continue to go up. So all that narrative where it's like, the Bitcoin, the wealth is concentrated into too few hands. This is bullshit. It obviously gets better over time. And of course, the people that are saying that conveniently leave out fiat, which is so concentrated into the hands of the few. And that's just by design, right? Every time we talk about this a lot on the show, every time they press the money printer, they press P, wealth gets redistributed from the poor and the middle class that are saving in cash, right? And it gets redistributed back to the government and very wealthy people because their wealth is stored in either real estate or equities and stuff like that, which have asset inflation, right? If your wealth is stored in that, which most people in America and most people throughout the world can't afford to store in those things, so they have to store in cash. So it's basically theft. In Bitcoin, that theft does not happen, right? So very interesting. And also, the wealthier addresses in Bitcoin, perhaps they've been holding Bitcoin for 4 or 8 years and, they want to buy themselves a Lambo, even though that's stupid, but to each their own, I guess. Think about it. If you've been holding Bitcoin for 8 years and you want to buy yourself a Lambo, that's not a lot of your Bitcoin relative to what you have, right? So you're not going to want to you're not going to mine so much. So I suspect that goes into play. Now, in terms of the price dynamic, I'm not even going to get into that. I don't know what any of that means. I don't know what any of those addresses means. I'm just looking at it kind of from the aspect of Bitcoin's wealth inequality, even though I hate using that term, but I know that's a FUD point, so I want to address it. And I'm looking at it also from the growth of the network, right? Because it looks like the smaller guys, they're still stacking. They're still stacking the dip. Anyways, Phil.
Well, I was going to say, you know what, the number, it looks like it's actually increasing, and I'm going to suggest that we're seeing the further rise of the pleb stacker. You know, like this is that to me, that's what that signal is, right? Like from everything that you showed. But I actually want to get Big Al's take, because look, as I'm taking a piece out of Nico's book right here, always asking, what the guest thoughts were on where we would be right now. And Big Al, I read through your piece, Only the Strong Survive, and it's a fantastic DeFi and shitcoin dismantling piece that I suggest everyone read. And I just want to know, well, what are your thoughts on where we're at right now? Did you think that we were going to be over the 100K? Did you think that that the shitcoins would even continue to live this long? Yeah.
Well, I'll go. It's quite the leading question, but it's the right question to ask, and it comes simply to what you were mentioning about what we're seeing just in the economy in general and assets in general is that plain and simple, when we print money as a central bank, whether it's the United States, whether it's any EU country or any Eastern Asian country, the major economies, those assets, it flows to people who already own the assets generally, right? And then there are always bad consequences of that, inequality, et cetera. With Bitcoin, that's not possible. When it comes to price predictions, look, I've been doing this for well over half a decade now in this market.
We don't do price predictions on the show. So
yeah, I couldn't care less. It's like, oh wow, Bitcoin's crashed to a price not seen for 6 months. You got to zoom out into what you're investing in. And if you're investing for the sake of thinking you're going to sell to somebody else at a higher price, you're probably going to lose unless you're extraordinarily good and talented at that. But there are very few people in the world who are good at that. When it comes to will these other chains and assets that I do not believe due to the peace and only strong survive will accrue long-term value, no, I'm not surprised at all. And I also don't believe that they're going to go away even in the next cycle. What I believe is that the majority of the real-world value will be captured by and on the Bitcoin chain and layer 2 chains and applications. Because, as I put it out the piece, I think the strongest point we make is that most of what we're seeing is not an innovation. There is no innovation. Like blockchain itself is a really, really inefficient database, right? We might as well just host on AWS if we're going to centralize it. So I think they're going to exist. That's just human nature. People like to have things. And for sometimes, okay, maybe they can exist, but why these tokens would accrue value and why, you buy one, you go to sleep for 10 years, you'd hold it. I've not seen a very good case for 99.999% of tokens out there. Probably basically none.
What would you say to, because I know what some people might be watching this, especially if they're new to the show, might be thinking, what would you say to the fact that Ethereum in terms of dollar terms outperformed Bitcoin, right? If you zoom out in a long enough time scale, Ethereum still hasn't made an all-time high in Bitcoin terms. But I know a lot of people are focusing on that, right? What would you say to those people?
I would say, when you make an investment, if you want to get rich quick, go ahead, trade leverage and see how bankrupt you get very quickly. But maybe you get lucky, you get rich quick, and you actually cash out. Most people don't. When you make an investment, you're not investing by looking at the price of an asset all the time, right? Obviously, the price matters. But what you need to understand is what you are investing in. So, yes, Ethereum during bull markets, it's higher beta. That's not confusing to anybody, right? If you want high beta, you want growth, you go for, Dogecoin has outperformed everything. We're all the idiots who didn't buy Shiba coin or Dogecoin, right? But that's not how you build long-term wealth and generational wealth. You build it by buying assets that you fundamentally understand and are fundamentally sound. And all props to all the smart people who have maybe done well on those other things. But that's what I'd say. If your point comes to me to counter only the strong survive is, well, look at the price. You have not done your research.
That's exactly right. That is exactly right. And I just want to go back to something that Big Al said way at the beginning when answering this question. He didn't care about the price either. Every single Bitcoiner that we bring on, actual Bitcoiners that have been through this, they all have the same answer, right? We all feel the same way. It's like, sure, everybody looks at it, but nobody really cares because every single one of us is so zoomed out. It's just momentary noise.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you know, we've always it's not that we advocate. It's just that, like, look, like, you know, we're critical of shitcoins because of their centralization, but we've never told you not to buy a shitcoin. But just be very clear that when you buy a shitcoin, you're gambling, right? And Bitcoin is not really a gamble; it's more of an opt out, right? So again, it goes to, do you have long time preference or do you have short time preference? And I think that a lot of these shit coins, just because of their small market cap, are going to have a lot of volatility, and sometimes that volatility goes up. But anyways, Phil, it's time for the Daily Fail.
The Daily Fail is brought to you by Amber App. Check them out, amber.app. It is the easiest way to buy Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin stacking app by actual Bitcoiners. The link is down below.
Amber, the smart way to stack sats.
All right, so we're going to dive into this. This was actually, we were tagged a few times to cover the repeated Solana network fails. Okay, so we've covered a few in the past, but this is a more recent one, right? From 4 days ago. Let's dive into this. This is actually on Reddit. Let's see here. The Solana network is wrecked and unusable. This sub is a havoc. The Solana network is totally congested and unusable in any way right now. When people try to send coins out of the wallet, it gives a 404 error. I don't even know what that says.
Trying to take some coins.
Trying to take some coins. Yeah. Transaction fails. Explorer says 404 error. Some people will want to take some risks and add collateral, and the transactions aren't going through. It's basically an offline blockchain right now. This used to be discussed on the Solana sub a few times and used to be called out as FUD. The same shit is getting agreed now. I used to hear shit like decentralization is not the only important aspect. Network can be usable and also centralized and be successful. Decentralization is important. The bots are spamming with microtransactions because they're basically free. The only way to fix this now is increasing the transaction fees to make it expensive for bots to spam. Now, the signal in all this, which is, it's interesting that we have Big Al on, who dismantles the shitcoin so well, because somebody comments back and goes, looks like another ETH killer killed itself. Okay, now look, we've explained this several times, okay? These platforms are circuses. This is technology that does not need to be money. Now, we're not technology haters. For some reason, there's this idea that Bitcoiners hate technology and hate innovation. No, that's not true. Bitcoiners appreciate technology and innovation. We just understand that not every single technology needs to have its own Chuck E. Cheese token that rips off everyone that buys it. If technology is good and it's worthwhile, it can stand on its own. It will find investors. Why? Because the investors will look at it, see the value, and want to invest in it. But when there is no value in what you're doing, you have to scam people, and you scam them with a token. Okay, so you put the technology fuzz all around, right? Like Nico has mentioned before, the wonderful names, right? We always show you the great looking websites to get you excited to think this is the next big thing. This thing is happening, but it's not. Solana, I don't know how many times we saw all kinds of tweets out from Solana's the ETH killer, it's better, all of this stuff. And now look, right? This is the third time, I think, that they've had this issue, where the network is completely unusable, okay? And this thing is backed by all the big players. So that just goes to show you, it doesn't matter how much, you know what? It's actually kind of funny, right? It just goes to show you all the money is really in the marketing. That's really where it all is. Anyways, it's a short fail, but I thought it really outlines the major problem that we're seeing with shitcoins and, essentially the lies that just keep getting perpetrated. And look, that particular poster said it right there. Decentralization matters, but it's not just decentralization. So that poster is starting on their trip down the rabbit hole, but they've got some more work to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this goes back to what we were talking about during the numbers segment, right? And, the concept of when you're buying Bitcoin, you're not really investing, you're more so opting out of the old legacy financial system. And when you buy a lot of these shitcoins, what you're doing is you're inherently gambling. And the reason I bring that up is Solana had a very good performance last year, right? But the chain doesn't work. And it's centralized, right? So again, what were you really buying? You were buying hype. You were buying vaporware, and it was successfully marketed by the VCs that they don't see an edge in Bitcoin because they have to get in line like everybody else. It's much easier for them just to create a token out of thin air and then sell that to you as the next great thing. And in Solana's case, it was the next great Ethereum. Clearly, they had to sacrifice decentralization for centralization to make faster transactions, to make the transactions almost, inexpensive, right, to compete with Ethereum's narrative. So, it's just a crock of crap. But if you focus on Bitcoin, you focus on the signal, you have a long time preference, none of this shit's going to happen to you, right? And this is why we talk about, you could see it as talking shit. I don't think we're talking shit. I think we're rather just exposing what these scams really are. And yeah, man, it's just in all of them, including ETH, man. They all sacrifice decentralization for some other type of feature, for speed. But it's exactly what Big Al said, right? The point of a cryptocurrency, in my opinion, is decentralization. That's the innovation, right? A money that can't be manipulated, can't be captured by politics, right? That's what makes Bitcoin special. Bitcoin is non-democratic. Its monetary policy is set in stone. It's rules without rulers. You either obey the rules or you don't. You get burned if you don't obey Bitcoin's rules, right? With all these other shitcoins, right? With enough influence, whether you're the Ethereum Foundation or the Solana Foundation, you could change the rules. And if they could change the rules, that means that a nation state or government could eventually change those rules to their advantage, just like they've done with the financial markets, just like they've done with everything. A government captures it, right? Once it gets big in size, and they start either extracting things for their advantage, or they manipulate it in a way. What I find absolutely fascinating is everyone's talking about, the Fed meeting. The Fed meeting's at 2 p.m. Let's see if they're going to talk about tapering off or not tapering off. And the entire time I'm like, so the market is based on whether they're going to print money or not. Like, that's the entire financial market. And apparently that is the entire financial market. We're going to have Greg Foss next week to get a little bit more in detail about all that stuff. But yeah, man, it's just, decentralization is so important. And I think that a lot of people get lost in the shitcoin narrative and all the bells and whistles and all the exciting marketing. And then you might look at Bitcoin like this old, boring dinosaur. Well, the reason that it might appear boring and a dinosaur is because, again, the Bitcoin developers, right, and Bitcoiners, they put decentralization above all, because if it's centralized, it can be captured, and if it can be captured, it can be corrupted. Anyways, Big Al, what are your thoughts on all this? Yeah. Go.
Yeah, I love that was the transition, because it goes to something that is very difficult, and you have to be very impatient to learn it, is you have to go to first principles. What is the actual innovation created here? Like, why did Peter Thiel say, Bitcoin is what PayPal tried to do and failed? And what it comes down to is that, maybe one thing we might disagree on is Bitcoin is not sound money. Bitcoin is not digital gold. Bitcoin is the most robust settlement layer ever created, and it's built for the digital world. So it being boring is not a flaw. It is a feature. You want your Supreme Court to be boring. No economy, nation, or civilization in the history of the world has ever flourished without a strong judicial system. I always use Bitcoin's base layer as the judicial system, and it's the strongest judicial system ever created, and it's built for the digital world. That is why it's boring. It's supposed to be boring. Judges are boring. Rules are boring. But that's okay, because from there, then a monetary asset can come out of it. And that monetary asset is based on the strength of the judicial system and the strength of that economy. And Bitcoin inherently is none of these narratives that people say. It is a settlement layer. It is a settlement layer for the truth. And from there, you can build beautiful economies in the digital world. And, you know, when we talk about other chains, I don't use the word shitcoins and whatnot, primarily because I know a lot of people who invest in these things, who are some of the and have dedicated their development time and whatnot to projects. I don't see why they accrue long-term value. Some of the smartest people I know. But that's the saddest part about bubbles, is that it's not only the misallocation of capital, where people will buy up these assets and then lose their money. It's also a misallocation of talent. And that's what you saw it in the dot-com bubble. People were quitting their great jobs at banking consulting to go to dot-com, blah, blah, blah. And then 2 years out, they're out of a job. And they also now think they deserve to be a VP. It's like, no, you're an associate. Like, just because you were a VP at this dot-com place, you're an analyst, you're an associate. Like, that's like, get over it, move on. And what's sad is that I think that when we go away from first principles, like, a lot of what we're seeing, like Solana is a great example. It's like, I'm sorry, what's the innovation here? Like, why didn't I just build this on AWS? Like, why did we build any of this on Solana? And also, what have you actually built? I mean, I've never used any of these platforms in my day-to-day life. Like, what have you built? I fundamentally have not been answered the question as, what do you build outside of platforms that people use to trade tokens and then trade other tokens, then to hopefully be able to sell to somebody else? I mean, that's never been sustainable in the history of ever, and this time is not different. So that's my thoughts on all of this.
Yeah, but this time is different.
Of course it is. Yeah,
Big Al, this time they've got DeFi.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
and there's liquidity for the sake of liquidity's sake, which is a utility in itself.
Don't forget about
because
NFTs.
It's liquidity.
NFTs, bro. NFTs.
Oh yeah, NFTs. I forgot about NFTs.
And
my bad.
It's so funny because all of these things could have. It's exactly what you said, Big Al. They could have been built on servers. They could have been built on AWS, and they would have been a lot more efficient. But it's like you have to sprinkle in a little bit of blockchain and then pretend that you're decentralized until shit hits the fan, right? If shit hits the fan, Vitalik, hits the switch, and all of a sudden they have to change their algorithm and stuff like that. So it's just funny how that works, right? It's like it's decentralized until a certain point. And with Bitcoin, that's not the case, right? It's decentralized, period. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
It's set in stone. If you want to change the rules, you have to convince everyone else running a node, which is why it's important that you run a node, to download that new version of software that you're advocating. And
that annoys a lot of people. Because they're not used to that. They're not used to the fact that you actually have to get the community to buy into something. They're used to the fact that you can just dictate it because I own a lot of it, which is why I'm terrified by the idea of proof of stake. I mean, you have to give Ethereum credit. They've done an unbelievable job getting developers, unbelievable job of marketing. When I hear about proof of stake, I'm like, how does anyone pitch that and not just think that's the rich getting richer and the rich owning it all? And by the way, if that's how you do it, proof of stake is what we call equities in the normal world. Like, if I own a lot of a company, I get a vote on what the company does. That is not an innovation at all, actually. It's just breaking securities laws and saying, okay, look, we innovated. Well, you did. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely spot on, and it's unfortunate. I think that if you want to know what side of history you're on, Ethereum is supported by the World Economic Forum, and Bitcoin is detested by the World Economic Forum. And I think that in itself is a lot of signal. But yeah, I completely agree. I think proof of stake is absolutely terrifying. I think it's the new narrative. We saw BitBoy, we totally, crashed on the guy.
Isn't his
analyze.
ROI like -30 on average on his recommendations? By the way, like someone did an analysis, like -30 when he tells you to buy something.
Yeah, I actually put it in the group chat. But yeah, someone put it in the group chat, Phil. Maybe you could show it tomorrow. But essentially, someone had the time to, actually put onto a spreadsheet and put when BitBoy advocated to buy certain coins on his YouTube channel, and he put them on a spreadsheet, and all the returns are negative, right? So I mean, look, on this channel, we're always just going to be advocating for Bitcoin. We're not going to be telling you what we think the price is going to go. We're just going to stick to the signal. And, we advocate for dollar cost averaging. Slowly invest out of fiat, the fiat matrix, and invest yourself into Bitcoin, the freedom money. And I think that the more you understand that you're de-investing, and this is going to take time. It takes about 4 years in my experience, really. But you're going to understand that you're not really so much investing into Bitcoin. What you're doing is you're taking your financial sovereignty back. And the question that I always hit with people, especially in the beginning, I think this is extremely important to have in your mind, right? Is how much is the cost of freedom? Right? How much are you willing to pay for your freedom? Right? So in the first couple of years, especially if you bought at the wrong time, or if you aped in all in one time and you timed it wrong, right? It's happened to me before. I know it's happened to Phil. Pretty sure it's happened to Big Al. It's happened to everybody, really. And I know that in the first couple of years, especially if you bought at the wrong time, you might be looking at your portfolio and you might be thinking, oh, damn, I'm down in fiat terms, right? But it's like, would you rather own the dollar? Is that something you'd rather own? Would you rather own something that has no cap, that some dude in a suit in DC could just print unlimited of? Or do you want something that has absolute scarcity, that can't be debased, can't be confiscated, especially if you take self-custody, right? And again, none of these shitcoins could provide you with that level of sovereignty and that level of security. You're still going to have to answer to who's ever in charge of that foundation of that said shitcoin. Right, you're still going to have to. Vitalik is essentially your god if you own Ethereum, right?
And if I may interject here, I mean, you hit on the point of other coins, right? Again, it goes back to what's the actual innovation. So you have a way to opt out. I think there's 2 points that we need to be respectful of, and one goes to the fact is that look, you need the U.S. dollar because if you don't pay your taxes, if you're in the United States or whatever country, they're going to come up and arrest you. And you can feel real good about your Bitcoins in a jail cell. That is the truth of life. So not everyone can be fully on the Bitcoin standard as of today. And second is that we can't just dismiss everything else that comes out. There might be, like any technology, there might be something better that comes. As of today, and that's what this analysis was about, we love the idea of decentralized finance. It is a beautiful, beautiful concept. But the instantiation of what we're seeing today is not decentralized finance. It's not decentralized, and it's also not finance. There is no connection to the real world, and that's what's needed for yields and things to operate in the financial system. So I just say, I always take a step back and saying that's like, it's not like Bitcoin's going to be the be-all, end-all. It could be. As of today, I've not been proven as to why I would invest an extra US dollar, I clearly United States based off this interview, a US dollar into something else, because that is my version of opting out. But yes, I do have to hold US dollars at some points because I need to also pay taxes. And that's just a fact of life. So those are the 2 points I'd say, like, I'm maybe softer on them, maybe both of you.
Yeah, we go ahead, Phil.
Oh no, I was going to say I wouldn't say necessarily that that you're softer in that position. I can definitely relate and see and see why why you would feel that way. And also, I mean, look, I'm not entirely on zero, right? Like I still have USD like you. I have bills to pay, right? Like unfortunately, my mortgage lender does not accept Bitcoin. Okay, so. It's part of the dance. But to your point, right? I don't see anything right now that offers a 10x experience, and not just the experience, but a 10x of the current qualities of Bitcoin. I don't see anything in existence like that today. And so to me, it's like, why are we going to go stand in some other field that makes no sense? Let's just stand in the cornfield and let's stack the corn.
And the longer that Bitcoin remains at the top, the less the likelihood that there will be something else. And in terms of the tax subject, yeah, of course, man. I don't think anybody could fully live on a Bitcoin standard. Perhaps I should have rephrased myself. I think that you have, or the way that I look at it is have as little fiat as humanly possible, depending on your situation, of course, to live. And that's, I'm a huge advocate of that. I think that you have to defund the beast, so to speak. And I think that's a great way to do it. But yeah, man, of course you're going to have some fiat, to pay your taxes in April and, business expenses, employees, all that good stuff. Right. So yeah, I agree. Perhaps we're just too maxis, Phil.
We're almost there.
We're too toxic. But anyways, Phil, it's time for the Daily Meme Review. The Daily Meme Review is brought to you by Citadel 21. Do you want an actual magazine written by Bitcoiners? Are you tired of bullshit? Then you need to get Citadel 21. It's stories, articles, comics by actual toxic Bitcoiners. And it's scarce. There's only 1,000 copies made per volume. What the f*** are you waiting for? Get your print of Citadel 21 today. All right, this is why memes are awesome, right? They just completely ridicule the other guys. This was, which we covered yesterday. We dedicated the episode to this. IMF urges El Salvador to remove Bitcoin as legal tender. And here's the president of El Salvador. I see you, IMF. That's very nice. That's absolutely hilarious. This is why memes are so effective. This is the Bitcoin. Someone put this in the group chat. Bye-bye IMF news. Nayib Bukele is another monetary sovereignty for El Salvador, not continued enslavement. IMF, we urge El Salvador to strip Bitcoin of its status. These people are crazy, man. I can't believe they asked them to do that. Okay, anyways, moving on to the next one. This is by Jose Valdez. This is how IMF looks right now. Please, Bitcoin will destroy us. The little kid praising Nayib Bukele. I wouldn't get so cocky, okay? I wouldn't get so cocky, guys. We still have a long road ahead. Anyways, this is Jack Maulers. I would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling kids. The IMF.
Classic Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, Jack Maulers, Bitcoin, Nayib Bukele. Absolutely hilarious. All right, moving on to the next one. This is actually kind of scary. And this is, talking about the social credit system. The reason I talk about the social credit system is because this is what central bank digital currencies are going to enable. And this is a little image of essentially the functionalities of the social credit system in China, right? So anyways, check this out. So traditional input, social input, online input, income, tax payment, loan repayment, credit card bills, utility bills, payment of court judgments, right? That goes into traditional input. Then there is adherence to traffic rules, adherence to family planning limits, payment for public transportation, academic honesty, volunteer activity, piety, criminal record, shopping habits, reliability of information posted or reposted. Who gets to decide what is reliable or what is non-reliable information online? Shopping habits, interaction with other internet users. That is absolutely scary. So all of these things get calculated into a score, and then that score gets to decide whether you have access to the internet, what your loan rates are, you have access to social services, whether you pay a premium on insurance or not, whether you have access to luxury hotels, travel abroad, school. So essentially, it's worse than prison. It's a way to control every facet of your life depending on what your behavior is. And the reason that we say on the show, and the reason that we focus on Bitcoin and not shitcoins, is this is the future. While everyone's getting distracted on NFTs and monkeys, right? The future ahead of us is absolutely terrifying. It's a future of freedom or slavery. And slaveries are going to be enabled by central bank digital currencies. And freedom is going to be enabled by only Bitcoin, the non-corruptible secular money, not apolitical money as well, right? So, and when you see those graphs or those whatever, it really highlights how dystopian social credit system would be in the West. And they're already implementing some type of social credit system, and it's already here, right? It's under the guise of ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance, right? Social, same thing. It's like, how woke are you? How many people do you have on your board? Environmental, right? There's a lot of things that perhaps we don't agree with people that have different perspectives on terms of the environment, but we've definitely seen at least the environment narrative as a form to attack Bitcoin, right? It's funny because they don't attack proof of stake, which they can control, but they use it to attack Bitcoin, which they can't control, right? So again, very dystopian, and this is the future ahead of us. The battle lines right now are a little obfuscated, right? But I think that as time progresses, the battle lines are going to be more and more defined, and you're going to have to choose, right? Do you want a little slight inconvenient freedom or convenient slavery? And that's what central bank digital currencies are going to enable. Anyways, Phil, why don't you go first? I don't have my score yet.
Okay, that last meme honestly was super depressing. I just want to point that out. Very depressing meme, but the rest of them I enjoyed and thought were funny. And for all those memes, I am giving it this remote control for the heated insoles. That's right, it has a remote.
It looks like a special edition Trezor. Are you sure that's not a Trezor, Phil?
I swear. Look, it's not a Trezor.
Anyways, for those memes, I'm going to give it some vitamin B. B complex. Yeah.
It's important.
Yeah. Anyways, Big Al, what would you give those memes? What would your score be?
I mean, for the first one, for the Simpsons one, that was perfect. For the last one, also dystopian, but perfect. I didn't like Nayib, I forget his name, the El Salvadorian dictator. Yeah, he is a dictator at the end of the day. I like what he's doing, but, that's okay. It's not okay, but it is what it is. But I would give it all. I'd give a cold card to the first Simpson meme and the last one because it's dead on. So
okay.
that's my
good.
That's my read of it.
Good score. So an
score.
Incognito Trezor that Phil is lying that they're heat warmers. Some vitamin B and a cold card. Anyways, guys, we want to know, do you agree with our scores? Do you disagree? Let us know down in the comment section. And of course, make sure to subscribe to us on alternative video platforms like rumble.com and bitcointv.com. They don't censor there because it's Bitcoin TV. And make sure to join our Telegram group. Link us some Bitcoin memes to review because of Bitcoin meme review. We need memes to review because of Bitcoin meme review. Anyways, Phil, it's time for the daily news. Do you like 3D printed stuff, but you're too lazy to make your own? Well, you should check out Cloaks.com. He makes the best 3D printed Bitcoin merch, like the 3D printed Bitcoin art grenade. Opens up, you put your favorite hardware wallet in there, really cool stuff. Or the awesome, really dope 3D printed Bitcoin honey badger. Comes in 3 different, I would like to say shapes and sizes because that's what they say, but it's really just sizes. Anyways, take advantage of the link down below for 5% off CryptoCloaks.com. So we talk about the game theory of Bitcoin a lot and something called the better flag theory. And the better flag theory is simple, right? It's not simple, but let me explain it. But essentially, the citizen or the person, the individual, is going to go where they're treated best, right? And Bitcoin, essentially, it's going to enable, right, for you not only to vote with your wallet, but also your feet. Well, this also applies to nation states when it comes to Bitcoin, right? And it's simple, right? It's a simple concept to understand. If if China bans Bitcoin, right, or Bitcoin mining, another country is going to benefit, right? We've already saw that with China banning Bitcoin mining, and then the rest of the miners going to the United States. The United States is going to benefit from that, right? And why do I have this article pulled up? Well, something similar is happening on a world scale, right? And this article is kind of an introduction, right? Which is Biden warns Putin's the president of Russia, with sanctions as West steps up Ukrainian defenses. So when the U.S. warns of sanctions, it's something that we've heard so many times. It's just like, okay, well, the reason that the U.S. is able to do that is because the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency, and by being the global reserve currency, essentially the United States of America has weaponized the dollar for political ends, right? Now, whether you agree with Russia or not, we're not going to get into the politics of it. But as Bitcoiners, we fundamentally disagree with anybody who's trying to censor anybody's transactions, anybody's speech, because that's how Bitcoin functions, right? And what does this force Russia to do? It forces Russia to look for other options that are not the US dollar to do business, right? Because obviously they don't want that weight hanging over their head, right? And that's exactly what happened. Remember in the beginning of the week when the Central Bank of Russia announced that they were going to ban Bitcoin, or they wanted to ban Bitcoin mining. Well, again, it didn't happen, and the reason it didn't happen is because what I was saying earlier, the better flag theory, and Russia sees Bitcoin as a political advantage, right? They see it's like, oh, wait, you have an open monetary network that can circumvent U.S. sanctions? You know, that sounds pretty awesome. Anyways, let's see what Putin had to say. Russian President Vladimir Putin on Wednesday said the country has distinctive characteristics that allow it to benefit from Bitcoin mining, while its central bank last week called for a complete ban of the activity in the country as it worries cryptocurrencies could pose risks to its citizens. Is it really risk to its citizens, or is it risk to the central bank? Anyways, I digress. Putin also asked the Bank of Russia to reach a consensus with the country's Ministry of Finance, who on Tuesday discouraged a complete prohibition of Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin trading and mining in the country, citing how such a move could hurt Russia's ability to compete in the technology sector. So it's not only a competition aspect, right? But it's also, hey, why would I ban an open monetary network that the United States can't control? Anyways, the central bank does not stand in the way of our technological progress. And eventually, that's Putin telling the central bank of Russia to fuck off when it comes to Bitcoin. Anyways, makes the necessary efforts to implement the latest technology in the area. Putin stated in a Wednesday meeting with members of the Russian government, addressing the divergent opinions held by the government body and the central bank. The central bank's position in regards to cryptocurrencies is based on worries that the expansion of this type of activity carries certain risks, which is very similar to what the IMF says and all the other central bankers. But it's like anywhere that Bitcoin has touched, like especially in El Salvador's case, right? El Salvador, Bitcoin has been legal tender for not even a year, but there's already more people with a Bitcoin wallet than a legacy bank account, right? Anyways, although, of course, we also have certain competitive advantages, which is what I was talking about here, especially in the so-called mining. And why does Russia have competitive advantages? Again, because Russia is a huge country, has a lot of natural resources. And if it's a huge country with a lot of natural resources, you might make a really good bet that it has a lot of stranded energy. And if there's stranded energy, that means the energy is inexpensive for anyone who wants to buy. And if it's inexpensive, that means that Bitcoin miners are perfect there, right? We know for a fact that about 11% of the global hash rate is coming from Russia, 11.23%, right? So that's a pretty good amount. And I think that it's bullish, even though we basically knew this was going to happen, because the incentives that Bitcoin provides, no government is ever going to be able to match that. And if I was in Putin's shoes, and Putin is a dictator, he is an authoritarian, right? He's been in power for many years, since Yeltsin in the 90s, really. This guy's going to try to find whichever way possible to get an edge on the United States. Now, that's good for everyone in the Bitcoin network, right? Because while these two nation states are bickering and fighting each other, they're essentially trying to compete. And by them trying to compete, is that they're going to try to get an edge on each other when it comes to Bitcoin. So that means that they're not going to try to ban it, because they know if they ban it, look what happened in China already. China banned it, and all of that business, all of those miners just came to the US, all that new tax revenue, right? So unless, and Andreas Antonopoulos actually said this many years ago in one of his podcasts, unless all world governments, right, collaborate on one giant worldwide Bitcoin ban all at the same time, it's just not going to work. And let me bring something else. When have world governments ever have agreed to one big thing, right? And if they can't agree to one big thing, there's always going to be a country that has open arms to Bitcoin. And, you know, that's the case, right? We already have a nation state. And if you believe what Max Kaiser has been saying the next couple of days, we already have two nation states, right? That El Salvador already made it legal tender. Hopefully soon there's going to be another one in Central or South America. And again, if you're starting to have more nation states making this completely legal tender, it's just going to highlight the failures of fiat money, and they're just going to attract more Bitcoin businesses. You've already seen a lot of Bitcoiners, you know, before they were like, what is El Salvador? Now you have all these Bitcoiners from all over the world going and visiting the Central American country, and it is one of the poorest countries on the face of the planet, I might add, right? So again, you know, it looks like where Bitcoin goes, good things happen. Anyways, Phil?
it just got me thinking, right? Like how we exist in a timeline where somehow Putin is sounding like like an ally of Bitcoin. And the other thing is this, right? The other thing is this. I think that it's really interesting because I think when governments really look at Bitcoin, the smart ones anyways immediately realize that if they're being realistic, they know that they offer subpar services for a very high cost, and maybe they decide that they start to provide value. They're like, okay, look, if we're gonna actively support Bitcoin and support our citizens, then we need to make a change. The one thing I did want to point out, though, and it could be a joke, but there is one thing that all the governments of the world do agree on, and it's that they disagree. So I don't know if I can ever see them all coming together to actually ban Bitcoin. But let's be honest, there'll always be some miner out there because the incentives. This goes back to what you said. It's the incentives. It's like, okay, well then let me find what the loophole is so that I can continue to do this because it's good for me and it's good for the network. So yeah. I don't know. This is weird. That was, as you're reading through that, I'm like, wow, I was kind of surprised, And
again, we're not trying to make Putin into, some person. He's just following his own incentives.
That's right.
That the Bitcoin network provides by the way it's architected, right? And again, it's crazy that Satoshi knew about this when he created it. And it's absolutely fascinating to watch the Bitcoin game theory play out in real time. So while other channels are focusing on fucking JPEG monkeys and DeFi, right? We like to think that we're focusing on the actual revolution on Simply Bitcoin. Anyways, Big Al,
that's also, yeah. I mean, that's sort of my final comment. That's the beauty of it. That's the real innovation versus what we pointed out, and only the strong survive might be non-innovation. Is that it simply exists. It's open source software that's a settlement layer for truth. And regardless of, currencies have their place in the world. I do not believe the US dollar is going anywhere, frankly. People might disagree with me, but it's going to be there. I think that what you see is that, like you said, is everyone disagrees. Countries do not agree on things. But the one thing that everyone can agree on as humans, like what is a country, what is a nation? It is humans collectively working together to create an economy to hopefully uplift the average person, which has been the case, by the way. Like I would recommend everyone on the show to read Factfulness by Hans Rosling. Everyone likes to be negative all the time. The human condition has improved dramatically every single decade. And that's a fact. And that's when you look at statistics and facts. But what Bitcoin allows is essentially just there. It just exists. If you need a settlement layer for truth, it will be there. And it's built for a digital world, and it enables that. So it's just going to continue to eat away at people who make mistakes, leaders who make mistakes, and eventually it will succeed. So that's the real innovation here. And that's where all the value is going to end up accruing.
Absolutely, man. And by the way, if you want to step out too, because I know you had something at 2:30, thank you so much for coming on the show, bro. Everyone's going to appreciate it. But anyways, Phil, I got some more news.
Let's continue.
Check this out. So while Russia is waking up to the fact that, hey, maybe we're better off if we don't ban this thing, and the U.S., it looks like there's another fuck up. Anyways, okay. So check out this tweet by Jerry Brito.
One job.
He works at Coin Center. It's a Bitcoin and shitcoin advocacy group and lobbying arm in the swamp of Washington, D.C. So they're forced to be on top of this stuff. But anyways, check this out. Check out this tweet. Included in the America Competes Act, just introduced in the House, and which will likely pass in some form, is a provision that would be disastrous, not just for cryptocurrency, but for privacy and due process generally. The so-called special measures provision would essentially give the Treasury Secretary unchecked and unilateral power to ban exchanges and other financial institutions from engaging in cryptocurrency transactions. How would it do this? The Bank Secrecy, the infamous Bank Secrecy Act of 1970, allows the Secretary to identify a primary money laundering concern and take special measures. Now, if you've been subscribed to this channel, you know how we feel about the AML and KYC, right? We know we had a KYC AML expert, which you guys should definitely go watch that episode. And essentially, he breaks down the entire system, and essentially the conclusion that he comes up with is they're ineffective at stopping crime, and in fact, they actually protect criminals because criminals know that if they check off those boxes, that money is now considered clean. And the thing is, it doesn't stop crime, and the reason it doesn't stop crime is when the F does a criminal care about KYC and AML, right? So they're oftenly used against, these measures are often used against innocent civilians that are following the law, but because they didn't color in the lines exactly, they get fined, they get taxed, etc., right? Have you ever heard of compliance, right? It's so big, this compliance, right? This is what you're complying to. Anyways, and take special measures to require financial institutions to report information on the concern. 2, prohibit FLS from maintaining accounts related to the concern. Special Measures Authority is vast power that the Secretary of the Treasury has today. So in its current statute, there are checks on that power. What are those checks? First, the law requires the Treasury engage in the public rulemaking before instituting a prohibition. So they want to get rid of that. So no, the plebs. Oh, isn't democracy great? The plebs, you guys have no say in this. Second, the Secretary can impose a surveillance special measure through a simple order, but its duration is limited to 120 days and must be accompanied by public rulemaking. Again, they want to get rid of all the limits, all the checks on government, right? You guys can do whatever you want. We trust you, because they've never fucked anything up. While not full due process, these limitations at least alert the public and gives the public some opportunity to comment on special measures' merit or constitutionality. The new provision would do 3 things. Add certain transmittal funds to the list of things that can be banned by the Secretary, limit all public notice and comment requirements, limit the 120-day limitation for measures imposed without regulation. Now, look, let's be real for a second. Is it probable that Secretary Yellen is just going to ban Bitcoin and shitcoins tomorrow? Absolutely not. All right. But again, just like the infrastructure bill, what you're doing is that you're giving the government a much bigger stick to go after Bitcoiners if they see fit. So right now, when everything's fine and dandy, not a problem. But when inflation starts to hit 20%, 15, 20%, right? And the government is really, really trapped into a corner, right? And they need a scapegoat, not like governments have ever used scapegoats or anything, right? Again, this is giving them more unchecked power without absolutely no discussion from the public. And it's giving that power to a non-elected individual that's appointed, right? And that one individual gets to decide whether this entire industry is legal or not legal, night and day, without giving the public any type of recourse. That's essentially what this new bill is advocating for. Now, that doesn't provide stability, right? And that really shows you how these bureaucrats think of the space, right? It's an inconvenient truth to them. It's an inconvenient bother, specifically Bitcoin. So, yeah, man, it's again, and I just want to express this. I'm disappointed because this is the second time this has happened. First, we got screwed with the infrastructure bill. There was a giant effort, I'm going to give them credit, by Coin Center, by Bitcoiners, by everyone, to add an amendment, right? It only failed by one congressman. He was a Republican. He just did it. He wanted some military spending that wasn't included, and because he got angry, they never included the amendment. So the infrastructure bill, with its bad language, stands today, which the government can use to go after Bitcoiners. Doesn't mean they will, but they can. And again, this is the second time in a bill that must pass, right? And the reason they included it in this, the same reason they included a crypto provision in the infrastructure bill. It's like, infrastructure, what does it have to do with? The reason they do that is because they know these bills have to pass. right? And because they know they have to pass, they include all this stuff and they hope a lot of it sticks, right? And is this democracy? Like, is this government? Like, what is this? This is some bureaucrat that's like, yeah, they might be inconvenient in the future. Let's accumulate as much firepower as possible so that we can attack it if we see fit. But the silver lining to this, and again, I didn't do this on purpose, is again, when you see one country closing up and shooting themselves in the foot, you see another country popping up with opportunity. This time it just happens to be Russia, out of all places. And of course you have El Salvador, which is why Bitcoiners are advocating so hopefully about El Salvador. That's why they're talking. So it's like, you see El Salvador, you see the future. You see this, and it's like you see a bureaucratic nightmare of corrupt layers on top of corrupt layers, keeping this old dawdling machine moving, and it's just, man, it's archaic. It's evil. It's corrupt. I can't even think of more words. So I think, man, I think that this, Phil, if it does pass, right, we'll be on top of it, is just another recipe for disaster in the long term. It's another goddamn recipe for disaster, just like the infrastructure bill. We forgot about the infrastructure bill, but it's law, right? It goes into law, I think, 2023 or 2024. Mm-hmm. That's law. That means that if it stays law, the government can, and if you look at history, right, the government does abuse every single type of power, right, you give to them. Do you remember the Patriot Act? Look how much they've abused that to spy on American citizens. So you don't think that they're not going to use this? It's like, oh, Mr. Benevolent Master, please don't use that big stick on me. It's like, man, like, if Bitcoin ever does become a threat to the money printers, which we believe it will, of course they're going to use it. You know, it's just, it's obvious. But I think that these moments, again, the silver lining here is that they highlight the corruptness of this giant bureaucratic machine, right? It's fiat governments, nation states, right? It's incredible. Anyways, Phil?
Yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head, and I think you made some really interesting points. The other piece to this, the other piece to this is this, right? I think, and of course, I don't think we can quantify it, but as the money loses value, it's very difficult to continue to incentivize people to do insanely stupid self-harm things. Okay. And I consider helping to pass these kind of anti-freedom type of laws. Like, for me, that's what that is. Like that to me is self-harm, or a form of self-harm. Now, the reason why I'm explaining this is because, at some point, right, you can't incentivize them with the money anymore. So how do you incentivize these people?
Coercion.
How do you incentivize these group? Coercion, but you incentivize them with power. Right? You incentivize them with insane power. And how do you do that? You put laws in place to make it so that they can abuse these powers. So I just, look, this scares the hell out of me. It's absolutely depressing, right? That we essentially, we're getting hoodwinked twice. Okay? Like, we're getting hoodwinked twice. The great thing about Bitcoin is that anybody with the means can afford a miner and can plug this thing in and mine Bitcoin and be a part of the network. And we can do the same thing when we install the Bitcoin Core software, or we decide to get a hardware wallet and or get a node and all of that good stuff. So, you know what? I think, you said this before, we are in for an uphill battle. We're definitely in for an uphill battle. The governments are going to abuse the hell out of everything they can. So we should expect it. It'll be it would be a happy moment if we didn't have to go through it, right? But that, and this is the interesting thing, right? At what point does Bitcoin cross that threshold where all of a sudden it's game on and they start looking and they start picking through?
Market
yeah,
cap
you think
gold.
So too, huh?
Market cap of gold.
Yeah. Okay. So we're both on the same page for that. I think so too. There's the psychological level that once that happens, they are going to lose their collective shit. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it's going to be like, okay, all the FUD didn't work. None of this worked. And then they're really going to turn on the noise and they're going to turn on the pain and it's going to get really freaking dystopian and weird. Hope we're wrong, right? Hope that we're wrong. But if that happens, It's going to be creepy.
Yeah, and have your money,
creepy.
have your Bitcoin, take custody of your Bitcoin, run your own node, and better hope you live in Texas or Florida, especially if you live in the United States. But yeah, man, it's going to get nasty. I completely agree. I just don't see any other way, Phil, right? Like, do you really think these bureaucrats, these government officials that are used to essentially shutting down, think about it, bro. They came up with a lie to invade Iraq, okay? Just kill millions of people, okay? It was all based on a lie, right? Weapons of mass, there were no weapons of mass, and we're just expect to swallow it, deal with it. Ooh. It's like, dude, like you're dealing with people that are literally crazy, and those people are going to look at Bitcoin, they're going to be, oh, this is so easy to squash. And they're realizing they're trying to kill this tiny little mosquito that just keeps dodging them. And they're just like, why can't I kill this thing? So it's like, man.
That's the interesting point that you make. The governments have gotten so big that they can't effectively control the smaller things, right? Like the smaller the day-to-day problems, right? You have local governments, right? And you have obviously you have the statewide governments and everything like that in the federal government. But the point is that the governments are so big, they can't move fast enough to pivot for Bitcoin.
Man, anyways.
Yeah.
Bunker down and subscribe to Simply Bitcoin. But anyways, Phil, there was an open source software release today. Why don't you tell everybody about it?
Software releases. The software releases are brought to you by CipherSafe. Check them out, cyphersafe.io. We've got the Cypher wheel, best place to store your seed, and they've got the all-new Cypher grid, did not bump the microphone, comes with the punch tool and the tamper wire. Link is down below. We've got the Simple Bitcoin Wallet, not the Simply Bitcoin Wallet. It's the Simple Bitcoin Wallet version 2.4.27 that was released. It's down below in the show notes. Guys, check us out. Audio only. You know the deal. Rain or shine, we post. Go ahead. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. And if you want to stream us sats, Fountain FM.
Awesome. Thank you, Phil. All right, guys, that was our show. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to smash that like button. But I also want to give a special shout out to our guest before we go. His name is Big Al. Go give him a follow on Twitter. And again, if you like the show, make sure to hit that smash button. And of course, make sure to subscribe to Simply Bitcoin if you want to hear Bitcoin news from actual freaking Bitcoiners. And we'll see you tomorrow, guys, for a brand new episode.
The governments can't stop Bitcoin. TikTok.
Next block.